Have you ever woken from a dream feeling it held a message, a warning, a guidance, or a truth only to have it vanish before you could grasp it? You instinctively felt it was sacred, but the world tells you it was just psychology. What if that instinct was right? We are taught that prayer is the primary way God speaks. But what if God, across all ancient texts, used a secret, deleted language to communicate with humanity? A spiritual technology that bypasses logic and fear. What if the earliest prophets, the wisest kings, and even the closest followers of Jesus used specific techniques to decode divine communication while they slept? This is not about interpretation. It is about technique. Today, we unroll the forbidden scroll of the deleted dream. We will reveal the three primary, ancient methods God used for divine communication. You will learn the profound reason why these sleep techniques were suppressed from mainstream teaching. And most importantly, we will show you how to reactivate this lost spiritual technology in your own life. Welcome back to Forbidden Scrolls. The most personal conversation you will ever have with the divine is waiting for you in your sleep. The Bible you hold in your hands often treats dreams as mere anecdotes. But in the history of divine interaction, they were treated as sacred emergency channels. The ancients understood that the logical mind, the part that doubts, filters, and analyzes, is an obstacle to divine communication. Sleep disengages this critical mind, opening a direct line to the subconscious and, potentially, the supernatural. The deleted wisdom recognized sleep as a spiritual vulnerability, a place where the divine could bypass ego and fear. Our deep dive begins with the first, most powerful method of communication, the warning dream. This type of dream is a clear, prophetic intervention designed to prevent disaster or redirect a destiny. It is a communication of pure, objective information. Consider the story of Joseph, the foster father of Jesus. The text records three distinct, critical moments where an angel delivered a message to Joseph while he slept. The command not to divorce Mary, the command to flee to Egypt to escape Herod's wrath, and the command to return to Israel. These were not symbolic. They were divine military orders that protected the Messiah's life. Another stunning example is found in the story of the Magi, the wise men from the east. The text simply states, "And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road." This was a clear, concise instruction that saved their lives and preserved the secrecy of the Messiah's location. The suppressed wisdom teaches us that this type of dream requires radical, immediate obedience. It is not for debate or interpretation. It is a literal command. The challenge of the warning dream is that it often contradicts our logic and personal safety, but its purpose is always the preservation of a greater divine plan. This is the first technique, the direct command. The second method of divine communication is less about command and more about prophetic architecture, the decoding dream. This type of dream is rarely literal and requires a gifted interpreter to unlock its meaning, serving as a political or historical blueprint. The greatest example of this technique lies in the courts of the ancient empires, where the divine used dreams to communicate the rise and fall of world powers. Consider the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar, recorded in the book of Daniel. The king saw a colossal statue made of 4 different materials: gold, silver, bronze, and iron, which was then shattered by a stone. The king was utterly incapable of understanding this vision, which caused him immense anxiety. This is a key insight. The divine sends messages that are often deliberately veiled to test the recipient's spiritual integrity. The message was not meant for the pagan king. It was meant for the prophet Daniel. Daniel, through his spiritual connection, was able to decode this complex vision. The 4 materials represented for successive world empires, and the stone represented the ultimate, unbreakable kingdom of God. The content was highly complex, political, and historical, a blueprint for centuries of world history. The forgotten principle here is that decoding dreams require a spiritual intermediary, a person connected to the divine who can translate the universal language of symbols into tangible human reality. In the ancient world, this skill was highly valued and necessary for the stability of kingdoms. The suppressed wisdom teaches us that this technique often reveals deep, structural truths about the world that our waking minds are too preoccupied to see. The challenge of the decoding dream is not obedience, but patience and spiritual literacy. We must learn the symbolic language of the spirit to understand the architecture of history. The third, and arguably the most personal and profound method of divine communication is the encounter dream, a direct, transformative meeting that fundamentally changes the recipient's identity or mission. This technique bypasses pure information and delivers pure experience. The most famous example is found in the life of Jacob. While fleeing his brother Esau, Jacob stopped to rest, using a stone for a pillow. He dreamed of a ladder or stairway connecting heaven and earth, with angels ascending and descending. The text records, he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." This dream was not a command or a prediction. It was a revelation of reality. God spoke directly to Jacob, reaffirming the covenant made with his fathers, Abraham and Isaac. The dream provided a visceral proof that the separation between the physical world and the spiritual realm is not absolute. Jacob's life was transformed from that moment. He understood his place in the covenantal flow, naming the place Bethel, House of God. The encounter dream serves a critical purpose, the affirmation of identity. In moments of greatest confusion, fear, or vulnerability, the divine reminds the recipient precisely who they are, who they serve, and what their eternal purpose is. The dream anchors the individual to the larger cosmic reality of the covenant. Later, the suppressed texts indicate that this technique was used to impart secret teachings to the most devoted followers of Jesus. These teachings were not meant for public dissemination, but for the inner spiritual guidance of those who would become the pillars of the early faith. The challenge of the encounter dream is not interpretation or obedience, but absolute reverence and integration, allowing the experience to permanently shift your understanding of reality. The deliberate suppression of these three dream techniques, the direct command, the prophetic decoding, and the identity encounter, was a direct consequence of the Church's move toward institutionalization and centralization. When the Church formalized its structure, the spontaneous, direct nature of dream communication became a threat. If God could speak directly to any individual layman in their sleep, the authority of the bishop, the emperor, and the official biblical canon was severely weakened. Dreams prioritized personal, mystical experience over institutional hierarchy. The formal establishment of the biblical canon and the later suppression of Gnostic and apocryphal texts effectively centralized the spiritual conversation. The message became, God no longer speaks directly to you. God speaks only through this book, and the interpretation of this book belongs only to this authority structure. The direct line to the divine was essentially relegated to history, and the spiritual technology was deemed redundant, or worse, heretical. However, the reality is that the core wisdom of these techniques remains essential. We, in the modern world, face an unprecedented barrage of noise that drowns out the divine. Reactivating these techniques offers a necessary bypass to the logical, fearful, and secularized mind. The wisdom of the suppressed texts teaches us that we can create the proper spiritual conditions for these communications. This isn't sorcery. It is spiritual readiness. To prepare for the warning, dream, direct command, you must cultivate radical obedience in your waking life. Your spirit must be conditioned to act instantly, trusting the divine over your own human survival instinct. To activate the decoding dream prophetic architecture, you must cultivate spiritual literacy, studying the symbols, the language, and the history of the divine flow, so that you can correctly interpret the visions, and to prepare for the encounter dream identity affirmation. You must cultivate deep reverence and humility, a recognition that your existence is entirely dependent on the source of all being. The final step in reactivating this deleted spiritual technology is understanding the practical, physical preparation required. The ancients knew that the body and mind must be aligned to receive complex spiritual information. This wisdom, largely lost, focused on the alignment of the waking self with the sleeping self. First, we must acknowledge the importance of purity of channel. Just as the Magi or Joseph were living lives of faith and obedience, the dream state channel must be clear of spiritual noise. This means that a lifestyle dominated by anxiety, moral compromise, or self-serving ambition creates a static so loud that the voice of the divine cannot penetrate. The suppressed wisdom insisted that preparation begins not in the bed, but in the day, clearing the mind of distraction and establishing clear, conscious intent. Secondly, the technique often required sensory anchoring. In moments of profound spiritual transition, like Jacob with his stone pillow, the physical world provided a focus point. This teaches us the principle of intentional focus before falling asleep. One must consciously empty the mind of the day's concerns and pose a single, clear question or problem to the divine. This is a deliberate, spiritual act of surrender, creating the empty space for the divine message to fill. Thirdly, the wisdom emphasized the need for immediate recall. The greatest challenge of the dream state is its ephemerality. It vanishes quickly. To retrieve the message, the ancients would often prepare to record immediately upon waking, before logic could filter or rationalize the message away. This practice acknowledges that the message is meant for the spiritual self, and translating it into the language of the logical self must be done quickly and without censorship. The true significance of the deleted dream is not just that God honors the prepared spirit. The suppression of this wisdom has left modern believers dependent on external sources, rather than trusting the deeply personal, powerful conversation that is available in the quiet hours of the night. By re-engaging these three ancient techniques, the preparation, the anchoring, and the recall, we begin to restore the deleted spiritual technology and reclaim the direct line of communication that was once reserved for the greatest prophets and kings. The greatest tragedy of the deleted dream is the silence it has created in your life. You were created for a direct, powerful conversation, yet you have been left dependent on secondary sources. But the silence ends now. You have been given the key to restore the ancient personal channel. This knowledge is not about interpreting fantasy. It is about activating a spiritual technology that bypassed the fear and logic of the waking mind for centuries. Your purpose is not to fear the night. It is to prepare for the revelation it holds. So, ask yourself, will you allow the noise of the world to continue drowning out the most personal message you will ever receive? Or will you take up the mantle of the ancient prophets and prepare your spirit to hear the deleted dream? If this journey into the suppressed spiritual techniques has awakened your purpose, then there is one final, crucial truth you must unlock. The moment you begin to hear the divine directly, you will inevitably confront the reality of the forces that sought to silence this communication. The true terrifying history of the forces that erased these books is revealed in the video appearing on your screen now. It details the precise act of power that established the modern version of faith. Thank you for seeking the truth in the Forbidden Scrolls. I invite you to commit to this journey by hitting the like button and subscribing. May your sleep be prophetic and your spirit always ready.